Summer camp is about to get a whole lot creepier. What is up, rad people? Summer is fastly approaching, and when I think of summer, I think of summer camps or camping or family vacations. So I figured now would be a great time to write some creepy summer camp creepypastas to share with you all. And I am so happy to announce that today's video is in collaboration with Mr. Davis. And on this channel, we are reading 3 of my original stories, and over in his video, we are doing the same, but with stories that he wrote. So please stick around to the very end and make sure to go check out his channel as well. So let's get to it. Urban legends aren't real. That's what I kept telling myself as I was setting up our tent for the night. I kept repeating the mantra, trying to calm my nerves. I and a group of 4 others were setting up camp for the weekend in an isolated section of forest. With us, we brought 2 cameras with night vision. We were here on a video assignment to gather information on the possibility of an urban legend being true. We were trying to capture evidence on camera to upload to YouTube. As summer just kicked off last week, this is what we chose to spend our next couple of months on. I thought the idea seemed fun until we actually got here. Seeing how everyone else was so excited for tonight's mission, I felt like I was the only one hoping to have an uneventful trip. As the sun dipped below the trees, we started a campfire. With the temperatures quickly plummeting, we knew it was time to set up the cameras on either side of the circle and gather around. After a moment of anxious silence, Jason, the head of our project group, was the first to speak. This urban legend can be traced back to the summer of 1937. Whispers of this story have passed down from generation to generation in our town. But until today, no one has ever tried to actually find proof of it being true. That's why we are here today, at the site of the long-abandoned campground, to spend a weekend in the very spot the events of the story took place 80 years before, hoping our presence on this anniversary will spark some activity. He cleared his throat and unfolded the piece of paper in his hands. According to the tale, a 14-year-old boy vanished during the night of the first weekend of this summer camp. No trace of him was ever found, and people can't even agree on a theory on what could have happened to him. The only thing that was left behind was a drawing found the next day, shoved into his pillowcase. It was a hastily drawn illustration of a tree outline with the words, "Leave," written below it. While it was presumed to have been done by the boy, his parents were adamant that the note was not done in his handwriting, leaving even more mysteries surrounding the case. After that night, no one in the area wanted to send their children to the summer camp, so it was left abandoned. That is, until 1987, when the local middle school decided enough time had passed, and after some renovations opened it up once more. However, the camp only remained open for the first weekend, where the children all left in fear after the first night. While playing a game of flashlight tag, one of the boys ran off alone and hid in a tree. A short while after, the group heard his terrified screams, followed by him falling off the tree branch and landing hard on the ground. He was covered from head to toe in scratch marks and was visibly shaking. When they were able to calm him down and ask what happened, all the boy was able to say at first was, "Leave." It said we had to leave now. When they asked what he meant, he told them all he saw was a human hand with claws scratching at him, and heard a voice that sounded like a mix of a person crying and an animal growling, telling him to leave. While some thought the boy was attacked by an animal, Others recalled the urban legend in what was written on the paper. Regardless of what they believed, the camp was closed and long forgotten about. No one has dared to test their luck for a third time. Just as he had finished the story, a strong gust of wind knocked over both the cameras. The sudden movement caused us all to jump out of our seats. In that moment, I knew I wasn't the only one who didn't want to be here anymore. Before any of us could speak, Jason lifted a finger to his lips in a hushed gesture. His eyes were fixated off in the distance. We each turned our heads to match his gaze. The piece of paper Jason had been holding while sharing the urban legend just moments before was now nailed to a large oak tree behind us. On it was a remake of the original note found at the campsite 80 years ago. We didn't hesitate to heed its warning. We grabbed the cameras, left behind the tents, and booked it to the car. We were all freaked out on the car ride home that no one thought to view the camera footage until the next day. While reviewing it, what we found made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. While Jason is telling the story, behind the thick brush, a boy can be seen standing still, facing us. He didn't move until the camera fell over. It was so fast, we had to go frame by frame to see him. But as the camera was falling, his blurred silhouette jumps from behind the trees to behind my back before disappearing out of frame. While this is the proof we needed, half of our group doesn't want to post the footage, fearing what it'll mean for our town and the safety of people that will undoubtedly be as curious as we were. So while I won't share the location with you, I will say this. I don't know what's in those woods for certain, but I do know no one should step foot into them ever again.
I was so excited for that summer. It was the first time I'd get to be a camp counselor after 3 years of attending the annual summer tradition. I had no idea it would also be the last time I stepped foot in those woods. Counselors had to arrive a week before the other campers to go over the training and to prepare the cabins. The thought of having a week amongst kids my own age with very little adult supervision sounded like a teenage dream. And it was, at least for a couple days. I noticed relatively quickly that the seasoned counselors were giving me a bit of a hard time, making me do the most manual labor or frequently calling me on to finish out tasks that they had started. Just typical things you'd expect. My parents had already warned me about the hazing tradition, so I was pretty much expecting it to only get worse before it got better. On the third day is when it really began. When I was cleaning the floors of the dining hall, the stereo began blaring music from the kitchen. Accustomed to the silence, it caused me to jump back and spill the mop bucket. When I saw the back kitchen door was left open, I instantly felt embarrassed that they had gotten me. To try and play it cool, I just went along with it and didn't bring it out to anyone that night. They didn't wait long to mess with me again. Earlier the next afternoon, I developed an intense itchy rash on my feet. It's a frequent sight every summer, and it's caused by poison ivy, and the trails to the lake are covered in it. But as I hadn't been into the woods yet, especially not barefoot, I knew something was up. When I went to go put on my shoes, I noticed little bits of leaves lining the inside. Someone had placed poison ivy inside them. My patience was wearing thin, but I didn't want to give the older counselors the satisfaction of seeing me upset. So again, I continued on with the mini task without a word. Everything seemed to simmer down after that. The next couple of days were spent goofing around while training and taking late night dips. I felt like I had made it through the initiation process. Of course, that's not what happened, or else I wouldn't be telling you this. The last day before campers arrived, we had lots of little chores we had to complete. By the end of the day, I was so exhausted, I skipped dinner to go to bed early. As I slipped in under the blanket, instead of a pillowy comfort, I was met with a soppy puddle that smelled like stagnant water. I kicked off the blanket and reached for the light switch. Looking at my mattress, a clear outline created by a wet body was left behind. I was furious. I stormed my way down to the dining hall where the counselors and supervisors were gathered. I didn't care if I looked weak or like a tattletale. I told them how I tolerated the extra workload, how I played along with the stereo prank, how I even kept calm though my feet were on fire from the rash, how I didn't plan on being the person to rain on their parade, but I was tired and this prank took it too far because now my mattress would be a moldy mess this summer. After my venting was over, everyone just stared at me in silence. Finally, one of the counselors spoke and said that they had no idea what I was talking about. Before I could retaliate for trying to make me look like a liar, the head supervisor told everyone to leave besides me. When we were alone, he sat me down to go over everything that I had experienced. As his expression grew more and more concerned, I started to fear my outburst would get everyone in more trouble than I was anticipating. As I tried to tell him I wasn't really upset anymore, he stopped me. Muttering how absurd this is, he told me when he was a camp counselor many years before, a friend and fellow counselor was notorious for playing pranks on the newbies every year. His name was Kevin. He would scare them while they were alone, and his signature prank was putting poison ivy in unattended shoes. When I asked him why he was telling me all this, he told me Kevin had drowned in the lake the day before the campers arrived. While he suspected that one of the counselors must have heard the story and decided to relive the prank to scare others, all the counselors profusely denied it. In fact, once news spread around, everyone was too freaked out to even venture off somewhere alone that summer. Most were convinced it really was Kevin pulling another prank on a new counselor, but I tried to be rational, siding with the supervisor that someone was just lying to save their butt. But one thing has kept gnawing at me through all these years. If it were just a kid trying to create an urban legend to scare us, they were a genius. Every single person was in the dining hall and everyone was completely dry. That bed was soaking wet, like someone had just jumped into the lake and plopped down in the middle of my mattress. How were they able to get a perfect wet imprint on my sheets and still be at the dining hall?
I'll never forget what I saw that day. I haven't talked about it much to anyone, but I feel now is the time to get it off my chest. Maybe then I can get some sleep. Not much is known about what went on at the camp, as no one who witnessed it is alive to verify the events. But we were able to piece together a general timeline of what happened. Let's start from the beginning. I am the overseeing advisor for the camp counselors of a local summer camp. I have been for the past 10 years, and never have I ever witnessed something this horrific. 3 days before the general campers were to arrive, 6 counselors were left with the task of preparing the lodges and campgrounds. Like every year before, they were left unsupervised, as we live in a safe, quiet community, and they were all seniors in high school with access to cars and phones in case of an emergency. Everything should have been fine. It should have been. From what we can piece together, everything went as planned on the first night and the second day. They cleaned 3/4 of the cabins, had set up the outdoor activities, assigned beds to each of the campers, and were in the process of wiping down the kitchen. It wasn't until late the second night that something must have happened. From the looks of the crime scene, they had successfully eaten dinner, put out the night's fire, and had been in their cabin at the time of the incident. Every morning and every night, I required a check-in from the counselors to make sure everything was going smoothly. Phone records verified I did receive a call the second night, right before dinner. Nothing seemed strange or a cause for alarm, so when I got a call around 5 a.m. from one of their cell phones, I shot awake at the screeching sounds of distress coming from the other line. It sounded like they were all screaming in unison. I would have thought it was a prank if the screams didn't sound so terrified. While I tried asking what was happening, whoever called hung up on me, and I immediately called the police. Speeding, we were able to reach the mountain campgrounds within an hour, just as the sun was rising. When we arrived at the scene, it was a sight of nightmares. There were footprints determined to have belonged to one of the counselors that ran through the fire pit. A dozen trees surrounding the cabin had their branches broken, some of which reached 70 feet into the air. The windows of the counselor's cabin had been broken from the inside out, but there were no other sign of damages to the inside or outside of the cabin. What's most mysterious was where the counselors were found. Well, what counselors were found? 3 of the 6 counselors were found inside one of the 4 cars. The keys were in the ignition, as they were in all the other vehicles too. They all had full tanks of gas, the tires were intact, and the engines appeared to be in running condition. 2 counselors were even found to have their phones in their pockets, and they were still on. One other body was found at the base of the furthest tree with broken branches, clothed in just pajama bottoms. The autopsy showed each counselor sustained multiple broken bones and internal bleeding. But that wasn't what killed them. They each suffered from heart attacks, not brought on by any cardiovascular disease. It was as if they were scared to death. The time of deaths were determined to have been between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., well before the phone call. The other 2 counselors' bodies were never even found. As for the idea that an animal attack caused their deaths, there is no evidence of an animal being present. No paw prints were found, and their food was still left out from their dinner. For the theory that a person did this, there were no fresh footprints or fingerprints or tire tracks on the grounds that didn't belong to the counselors. We don't know what caused it, and we don't think we ever will. Well, I hope these stories were able to make you look at summer camp a little bit differently. And I hope you would even be inspired to read some of these stories around the campfire this summer, because that'd be really cool. If you haven't done so already, please go check out Mr. Davis's channel and his video. There's a link right next to me somewhere and down below in the description. His video is super cool and will definitely come in handy for some more summer nightmare fuel, which we can never get enough of. If you're coming over from his channel to this channel, I hope you like what you saw and join the Rad Fam, because we would love to have you. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep up the radness, and I'll see you real soon. Bye!